Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. It's Colin, and today we're going to be reviewing the brand new album from UK rock band Sleep Token, Even in Arcadia. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm a little late to the Sleep Token train. I've obviously heard their name. I mean, you have to have been living under a rock for the past, 6 years if you haven't heard of them. And they've just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I know, last year, I think they were playing Red Rocks for, 50, 60 bucks. Now they're selling out Ball Arena for $200 a ticket. So clearly they have become extremely popular. And I love that for them. I think any band that puts this much dedication into not just their performance level, but their background, their story, the way that they present themselves, I'm happy to see them have success. Also, any hard rock metal band that's getting younger people excited, I think is just only a positive thing. The more people that start getting into heavy music, the better. That being said, I was not expecting what I heard on this album. So I had heard a couple of their songs here and there before, but I never really took the time to full on listen to them. Not necessarily on purpose, but from what I had heard, I just wasn't super interested in diving a little bit deeper. But I mean, with them just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually it got impossible for me to ignore. And I felt like I had to at least give this album a proper shot. With that being said, let's dive right into the track list. But before we do that, if you could please subscribe, comment, ring that bell for notifications. All that stuff helps out the channel a lot. And stick around to the end of the video to hear my final grade on this album. The album opens up with the song Look to Winward, and this is certainly a good way to open the album because it kind of sets you up for what to expect, but also if you're not familiar with Sleep Token or their sound in general, you're going to listen to this song and be like, what the hell am I listening to? So the first few minutes is this really slow kind of atmospheric intro, some sort of eerie synths, and then when the vocalist does eventually come in, I believe his name is Vessel, or at least that's his stage name, you can tell that he's got some real chops. I mean, very unique voice, very soulful, does some vibratoing pretty well, and he's got a good mix of kind of a pop R&B background that can actually work fairly well over some harder rock and sort of metal leanings, which they do get into at certain points. Then, I want to say about almost 3 minutes in, roughly, there's some light strings and some kind of spectral wails and backing vocals that kind of overwhelm the sort of melancholy that's been going on up until this point, until it does eventually hit you with some kind of crushing guitars and pounding drums. And it reminds you that technically they are a metal band, or at least they fit in that category, which I will argue against a couple points in this album. But yeah, it does that for a little bit, kind of goes back and forth, and then it hits you with this drum machine trap beat, which he then kind of sings over. And it's interesting. It's not necessarily the direction I would have gone, but hey, it's not my song, it's not my album. And then they kind of go back and forth between that and some of the actual rock instrumentation a couple times. And yeah, it's weird because I think when the drums really come in on this album and on this song in particular, they're done really well. And then to complement that with a drum machine, it's weird, and I don't think it works super well. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting opening song. After that, we get into Emergence, which starts with this sort of pop R&B vibe vocals with some light piano, and again some more kind of atmospheric strings, before eventually kicking back in to a hip hop beat. And even at that point, Vessel's singing almost gets to a sort of rap quality to them. Not fully going in that direction, but you can hear some influence in it. Which is, again, I think it's a very unique style that I haven't heard a ton of up until this point. There's a few other bands that have done like similar stuff before, but I definitely think they do whatever this is pretty well here. The vocals kind of remind me of almost like The Weeknd at certain points. And then when the guitars do hit, it's actually like it works super well. I'm not gonna lie, this song is catchy as fuck. Like by the third time I was listening to this, I was like, oh, okay, this is weird and it's not what I expected, but somehow it is fucking working. And yeah, I actually really like this song. I think the first part of this album is pretty strong, and it creates a very unique experience of something that I haven't listened to maybe ever, or at least in a very long time. I mean, there's other bands that have done similar stuff. Obviously, like Falling in Reverse has their whole shtick, and I don't like Falling in Reverse, so I'm not going to get super heavy into that. But you know, even like Bring Me the Horizon has done stuff like this. Whatever the hell Icy Stars has been doing recently, like there's been a lot of metal bands that have been incorporating more like pop and almost like hip hop and R&B into their songwriting, and it's worked fairly well. And I do think this is a pretty good example of that. And then towards the end of the song, it does settle into like some genuine atmospheric metalcore parts, which I do super dig. And then it finishes with this really kind of like soulful sax outro, and it just caps off a pretty cool listening experience. Then we get into Past Self. And this is as far as you can get from a metal song. This is a straight up like R&B pop hip hop song. It reminds me a little bit of like the White Tie Affair, which is not a band I've thought of in a very long time, but like the first time I heard this song, I was like, oh shit, that kind of reminds me of them. And I'm not gonna lie, like I like this one too. It's definitely not what I expected. They went full into the like pop and R&B rock adjacent arena with this song, but it does work. It works pretty well, and I'm not gonna lie, like by the third time I was listening to this, I was definitely nodding along and like getting pretty into it. So I think those like first three songs definitely paint a pretty good picture of like where this album is going, or at least I thought it did. And then we get into Dangerous, and Dangerous is probably one of my least favorite songs. It's like starts with this soft sort of like pop rock vibe before getting back into the weird like trap hip hop beats that I did enjoy in like bursts before this, except on like that main song. I think it kind of was a little weird. But it's by this point, I'm not really feeling it on this song. And yeah, overall, this is probably one of the more boring songs for me. Even when like the guitars and the rock does kind of come in, it feels pretty like generic, sort of just like past 10 years hard rock, and there's nothing about it that's really jumping out at me. But then we get into Caramel, and Caramel is probably, I don't want to say it's my favorite song on the album, but it's definitely one of the ones that initially grabbed me, and I kept enjoying more as I got into my second and third listens. It starts off with like this haunting music box kind of melody, and then like Vessel's vocals kind of come in over on top of that, and they play off of each other for a little bit. It does settle into some of the more straightforward kind of like ballad-driven pop rock that we've heard a couple times up until this point. But I think it's done pretty well here. It is very catchy, and even like some of the moments of like hip hop beats, it sounds like they're actually like playing them on real drums and guitar and keys, as opposed to what has sounded like a drum machine up until this point. Again, I haven't dug super deep into the personnel or like the actual breakdown of the instrumentation on these songs, besides like what I've just heard. So maybe they don't use drum machines. Maybe it's all performed live and they're just doing their best to make it sound programmed. But anyway, it sounds a little bit more natural on this song, and I do like that. And then eventually hits you with probably one of the heaviest moments on this album, with some like genuine blast beats. The guitar comes in down-tuned and heavy and just in your face. Some legitimate screams at this point, which are a pretty nice breath of fresh air. Not that I don't enjoy Vessel's like very soulful, vibrato singing, but I needed a little bit of like dirt and grime in this album, and I feel like I'm finally getting some at this point. And then we get into the title track of Even in Arcadia, and this one, it's a 4-minute song, but it feels like a transition track to me because it's very slow. It's pretty much just a straight up ballad. more kind of atmospheric, hard pop rock, which is what I'm giving the majority of this album. Like, I don't even want to classify most of it as metal, except for like a couple points here and there. Like, this is a pop rock album. It's a good pop rock album. It's a fairly heavy pop rock album at points, but it's straight up pop rock, and I don't think that it fits neatly into the metal classification outside of, again, like a couple moments. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, we're at a point in music right now where genre rules mean jack shit, and you can pretty much do whatever the fuck you want, and as long as it sounds good, like, most people are going to vibe with it. And I think the majority of this album up to this point sounds pretty good. So whatever the hell you want to classify it as, I don't necessarily think it's metal for the most part. I mean, again, a couple moments here and there, but overall it's pretty decent. This song does end with some cello. There's not a single metal moment on this song, but the cello kind of comes in towards the end. At least I think it's cello. It's very nice kind of breath into the last few songs on the album, which at least the next three, in my opinion, are the hands down the weakest songs on the album. So you get into Provider, which is probably one of the most disappointing songs on the album. Not because it's bad. I mean, it starts off very much the same way. You've got some atmospheric sort of like synths and guitars and strings that are all very much just like kind of muddled together into this sonic experience. And then the vocals come in and it's very, crooning, and it's very mournful, and you could hear the emotion and the longing, and it's done well. That it settles into some more kind of just generic atmospheric hard rock, which again is not bad, it's not offensive, it's easy to listen to, but nothing super exciting. But there's a brief moment towards the end of the song where we get some of the best drum work on the entire album. But it's only like 10-15 seconds long, maybe 20, and then it goes right back into it. So like, that's why this song disappointed me so much, because I heard that and I was like, oh shit, like, we're about to get into it, and then it was just taken away from me, which really, really upsets me. If you watch enough of my reviews, I always am gravitated towards the drums, and to like get a little tease of some brilliance and then have it like drop out from underneath me was not great. And by the third time I listened to it, like, I was anticipating this part, and when it hit, it just made me that much more sad that it didn't last. After that is Damocles, or I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's been a long time since I've read anything that's related to ancient Greece, which I think is what this is from. But yeah, this is just like a pop rock ballad. It's not bad. It's good enough. The vocals are solid. The guitar work is atmospheric, and the drums are decent here and there. I feel very similarly about this song as the last couple of songs, because again, I'm just not getting a ton of variation here. Even when like the heavier parts come in, or like the rock parts come in, it definitely feels like it's just moving the whole like melancholy vibe along. And overall, it's a fairly gentle song. Then we get into Gethsemane, something like that, which is, again, I feel like kind of more of the same. It's, again, I think it's a fun experience. They're going back and forth between like the piano driven vocal melodies and then like some harder rock, and then back and forth, and they bring back the drum machine at one point for some ungodly reason. But yeah, these three songs just all kind of melted together for me by my third listen, and I was kind of getting bored at this point, which then leads to the closing song of Infinite Baths. And Infinite Baths is an 8-minute song. And I gotta say, the first time I listened to this song, for the first like 2 minutes, I was like, is this really how they're gonna end the album? Like, basically just rehashing all the same ideas that we just got on the previous three songs. But then it settles into this really sort of like dreamy bridge that like starts teasing these little just like snippets of like nightmarish sort of like vocal samples, but they're not like strong enough or at the front to really like tell what they are. They're just kind of like, sounds like someone's just kind of like whispering behind you. And then it hits with arguably the heaviest part of the entire album, and the closing of this track is just brutal. Like, the drums are incredible, the guitars are in your face, they're aggressive, some of the best screams, or I guess the best screams, because we've only gotten them once before on the album. And I'm glad that this is how they chose to end it, because if they had just gone out on a whimper, I would have like probably given this a much lower grade than I'm going to. But I do think they went out on a high note, and the back half of this song is crushing, and it's very, very well done. So overall, like, I get why they're becoming as big and as popular as they are, because it's easy to, you know, grab onto something you do like in this band. I think that especially for like a younger generation, it's very accessible. There's the mystique behind their theatrics, their stage presence, the fact that no one knows who they really are, which all add to the narrative of who Sleep Token is. I hear their live shows are really, really cool, really good. I would love to see it at some point. I'm not paying $200 to go see it at Ball, but maybe at some point in the future I have an opportunity to see it at a much more reasonable price. But all of that being said, like, nothing really grabbed me in this album outside a couple of moments on a couple of songs. I do think like the second and third tracks were really, really fun, and they're definitely going on a couple playlists that I have. I'll probably put Caramel on a playlist. I'll probably put Infinite Baths on a playlist. But outside of that, I wasn't really gripped by the majority of this album. Doesn't mean it's bad, just means it wasn't necessarily for me. So with all of that being said, I'm going to give this a B. I think it's well done. I think if you're going in expecting a metal album, you're going to be disappointed, because it's not a metal album. As far as I can tell from this particular album, they're not really a metal band. They have metal elements, and I like those metal elements. But at the end of the day, they are a pop rock band, a fairly heavy pop rock band, but they are a pop rock band nonetheless. But they're doing it well. And again, I'm very excited and grateful for anyone that is getting a younger generation into heavy music, and I think they're certainly doing that. So that's going to be it for me, guys. Once again, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you haven't listened to this album, go check it out. And as always, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.